You know the funny thing about family? They will respect a deadbolt, but they never respect a boundary. They will joke that you are just doing paperwork right up until the moment the driveway fills with black SUVs and the living room becomes a crime scene. The worst part is that by the time they finally believe you, it is already too late to undo exactly what they touched. My name is Riley West, and if you looked at my employment file at the Sentinel Risk Intelligence Office, you would see a lot of terms that sound impressive to people who watch too many spy movies. Senior Threat Analyst, Tier 1 Clearance, Cryptographic Asset Specialist. I am 33 years old, and I have spent the last 7 years of my life staring into the digital abyss, predicting which tiny ripple in the data stream is going to turn into a tidal wave that drowns a city. I am good at it. I am disciplined. My life is a series of encryptions, two-factor authentications, and biometric locks. But to the people currently sitting around the kitchen island in Arbor Ridge, Maryland, I am just Riley, the daughter who pushes paper, the sister who takes things too seriously, the woman who never quite made it to the impressive status of doctor or CEO. I pulled my sedan into the driveway of my parents' house, the tires crunching over the perfectly manicured gravel. It was a Friday afternoon, the sky a bruised purple over the suburban sprawl. And I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. It is a specific kind of anxiety reserved for high-functioning adults returning to their childhood homes. It is the fear of regression. I checked the bag on the passenger seat next to me. It was a reinforced ballistic nylon briefcase, nondescript and boring, secured with a biometric padlock that cost more than my first car. Inside that bag was a laptop containing live threat assessments on a developing situation in the Eastern Hemisphere that made my blood run cold. To my family, however, that bag was just a prop. It was part of my boring, bureaucratic costume. I took a deep breath, grabbed the handle, and stepped out into the crisp Maryland air. I told myself to keep it simple. Do not engage. Do not explain. Just survive the weekend. When I walked through the front door, the smell of roasted garlic and expensive red wine hit me. They were already in full swing. My mother, Elaine, was holding court at the granite island, chopping vegetables with a vigor that suggested she was angry at the celery. My father, Grant, was leaning against the refrigerator, swirling a glass of Merlot and looking like he was posing for a retirement brochure. There she is, my father boomed, beaming a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. The Fed finally graces us with her presence. Grant, be nice, my mother said, though she did not look up from her chopping. You know how traffic is for government workers. They probably shut down the highway for a motorcade or something equally dramatic. I forced a smile and set the black briefcase down by my feet, keeping it touching my leg. Hello, Mom. Hi, Dad. Then came the siblings. My sister, Tessa, drifted into the room like a cloud of sterile perfection. She was wearing scrubs that somehow looked tailored, her hair in a messy bun that was artfully disheveled. Tessa was a pediatric surgeon in the hierarchy of the West family. That made her God. Riley, Tessa said, giving me a one-armed hug. You look tired. Are you eating enough? You look like you have been living on vending machine coffee. I am fine. Tess, I said, shifting my weight. Just a long week. And then there was Logan. My younger brother sat on a bar stool, tapping furiously on the latest model smartphone, wearing a blazer over a t-shirt because he had read somewhere that it projected creative authority. Logan ran a boutique marketing agency that had seen a sudden, meteoric rise in the last 18 months. He smelled like expensive cologne and desperation. Hey, Riles, Logan said, not looking up from his screen. Still saving the world one spreadsheet at a time, I ignored the jab. It is easier that way. I picked up my bag. I am going to put my stuff in the guest room. I will be right down. Make sure you do not lock yourself in there. My mother called out as I headed for the stairs. We are doing family time. Riley, no hiding. I walked up the stairs, the heavy bag bumping against my thigh. This was the dance. I had learned the steps years ago. The only way to survive a weekend at home without losing my mind or my security clearance was to become exactly what they thought I was: boring, basic, unimportant. I entered my old bedroom. It had been converted into a generic guest room years ago, stripped of my personality and replaced with beige linens and generic framed prints of sailboats. I placed the briefcase on the small desk in the corner. I checked the window, locked. I checked the door. It had a simple privacy lock, the kind you could pop open with a paperclip. It was useless against a determined intruder, but it should have been enough for family. I sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at the bag. Inside, the hard drive was encrypted with a standard that would take a supercomputer 100 years to crack. But the physical documents, the scratchpad notes I used for active analysis, the localized threat maps, those were vulnerable if someone actually put their hands on them. I had warned them. I had told them 1,000 times, do not touch my work bag. Do not move my laptop. Do not clean up my papers. But they heard what they wanted to hear. They heard. Riley is being difficult again. They heard. Riley thinks her little government job is so special. To avoid the arguments. To avoid the rolling eyes and the sarcastic comments about James Bond. I had developed a phrase, a shield. I called it all basic work files. Are you working on a classified terror threat number, Mom? Just some basic work files. Are you tracking a money laundering scheme funding a warlord number, Dad? Just reviewing basic work files. It was a linguistic invisibility cloak. It turned my high-stakes reality into something mundane, something that made their eyes glaze over. It was a lie, but it was a lie that kept the peace, or so I thought. I went back downstairs, my phone in my pocket set to vibrate, only for priority 1 alerts. Dinner was an exercise in patience. We sat around the large oak table, and the conversation flowed exactly as I knew it would. Tessa dominated the first 40 minutes. She spoke about a complex surgery she had performed on a toddler, her voice modulated with the perfect amount of humility and expertise. My parents hung on her every word. Dad nodded solemnly. Mom looked like she was about to weep with pride. "That is incredible, sweetheart," my father said, refilling Tessa's wine glass. "You are doing God's work. Truly." Tessa smiled, basking in the glow. It was touch and go for a minute, but the team pulled through. Then the spotlight shifted to Logan. He launched into a story about a new client, some tech startup that wanted to disrupt the toaster industry or something equally ridiculous. He used words like synergy and vertical integration and viral coefficient. "We are crushing the Q3 numbers," Logan bragged, gesturing with his fork. "I am telling you, this agency is going to be the biggest thing in DC by next year. I might even buy a boat." My mother clapped her hands together. "Oh, Logan, that is wonderful. You have always had such a head for business, so practical, unlike some people who prefer to hide in the shadows." The gaze of the table shifted to me. I took a sip of water, keeping my face neutral. "So, Riley," my father said, his tone shifting from admiration to tolerance. "How is the Bureau still shuffling those papers?" "It is fine." "Dad," I said, "busy." My mother leaned in, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You are 33 years old. Riley, do you not think it is time you looked for something a bit more open? I mean, we never know what you are doing. It creates a distance, a wall. I am not trying to create a wall." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "my work is just sensitive. There are privacy laws." Logan snorted. "Privacy laws? Come on. Sis, you are not in the CIA. You analyze risk. That is basically insurance work with a government badge. You are probably just calculating actuarial tables for flood zones." I felt a flash of irritation. 2 hours ago, I had been reviewing satellite imagery of a convoy moving hazardous materials across a border 3,000 miles away. But if I said that, they would laugh. Or worse, they would ask questions I could not answer, and then get offended when I hit a hard stop. "It is just basic work files. Logan," I said, "using the shield, compliance reports, audit trails, boring stuff. You would hate it." See, Tessa chimed in, cutting me off before I could finish my sentence. "I told you guys, She is just doing administrative support. We should not pressure her. Not everyone is built for high-stress careers. I gripped my fork tighter. The condescension was physical. It felt like a pat on the head. Poor Riley, the slow one, the bureaucrat. I tried. Once, to explain the concept of operational security to them. I tried to explain that information is a weapon. I told them that the things on my computer could ruin lives if they got out. My father had laughed and said, "Riley, honey, nobody cares about your spreadsheets. You are not protecting the nuclear codes. Don't be so dramatic." That was the word they loved. Dramatic. If I locked my door, I was being dramatic. If I asked them not to post photos of me on social media where my location could be geotagged, I was being dramatic. If I told them that my job involved people who kill for a living, I was being dramatic. So I stopped. I became the paper pusher. I became the boring daughter with the boring files. "Let us talk about something else," I said, forcing a smile. "Logan, tell us more about this toaster startup." I deflected. I absorbed the dismissal. I played the role. By the time dinner ended, I was exhausted, not physically, but spiritually. I helped clear the table, enduring my mother's passive-aggressive comments about how I loaded the dishwasher. "You know, Riley, if you paid more attention to details, maybe you would get promoted." I almost laughed. I had been promoted 3 times in 4 years. I ran a team of 12 analysts, but in this house, I was incompetent because I put the forks in the wrong basket. I excused myself around 9 o'clock, claiming a headache. "I just need to finish up some reading." I said, "Oh, right." Logan called out from the living room, where he was pouring himself a brandy. "Do not stay up too late with your basic files. Riley, do not want to get a paper cut." They all laughed. A warm, familial sound that made me feel entirely alone. I walked up the stairs, the laughter fading behind me. I reached the guest room door and paused. I had the distinct sensation that I should have set a physical trap, maybe a piece of tape on the doorframe, just to see, but I was tired. I told myself I was being paranoid. They did not care about my work. They thought it was boring. Why would they snoop through something they despised? I went inside, locked the flimsy privacy lock, and sat at the desk. I opened the biometric case. The green light of the scanner flashed, confirming my identity, and the heavy latches clicked open. I lifted the lid of my laptop. The screen came alive, casting a blue glow on my face. I logged into the secure Sentinel portal. The dashboard was a sea of red indicators. The situation I had been monitoring was not getting better. It was getting worse. I spent the next 2 hours in the zone, the sounds of the house, the television downstairs, the creak of floorboards. The plumbing faded away. I was not in Maryland anymore. I was tracking a financial footprint that was moving too fast through a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Around 11:30, my phone buzzed against the hard wood of the desk. It was a text message. I looked at the screen. It was not a casual text. It was from Director Vance. Subject urgent. Asset compromised. Immediate review required. Window closing in 4 hours. My stomach dropped. This was not a drill. This was an active, bleeding crisis. I sat up straight, the fatigue vanishing instantly. I needed to cross-reference the new intelligence with the physical notes I had in the yellow folder, the temporary folder I had brought with me because the printer at the office had been jammed, and I needed to annotate by hand. I reached into the bag. I pulled out the yellow folder. I needed coffee. No, I needed water and focus. I had about 4 hours to build a containment strategy before the market opened in Tokyo and the money disappeared forever. I stood up. I looked at the door. My family was asleep. The house was silent. I could run downstairs, grab a bottle of water, and be back in 90 seconds. I looked at the laptop. I hit the key combination to lock the screen. It went black, demanding a password and a retina scan to reopen. That was safe. I looked at the yellow folder on the desk. It contained handwritten notes, a few printed charts with names and transaction IDs. Sensitive. Extremely sensitive. Proper protocol demanded I put it back in the bag and lock the bag. But I was in my parents' house. It was midnight. They were asleep, and I would be gone for less than 2 minutes. They respect a deadbolt, but not a boundary. The thought flashed through my mind. a warning from my training. But then another thought countered it. They think your job is a joke. They wouldn't touch your boring files if you paid them. I left the folder on the desk. I walked to the door, unlocked it, and stepped into the hallway. The house was dark. Silence hung heavy in the air. I went down the stairs, my socks sliding on the polished wood. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and grabbed a cold bottle of sparkling water. I drank half of it in one go, the bubbles stinging my throat. I was already calculating the next move in my head. If the shell company was linked to the shipping firm, then the threat vector was physical, not just digital. I needed to call the watch officer as soon as I got back to the room. I turned around and headed back to the stairs. As I climbed, I saw a light under Logan's door flicker. He was still up, probably texting clients or checking his viral coefficients. I reached my door. I twisted the knob. I paused. Had I pulled the door all the way shut, I was sure I had heard the latch click. But now, as I pushed it open, it felt loose. I stepped into the room. The laptop was dark, exactly as I had left it. The biometric bag was open on the floor, where I had left it, but the yellow folder. I stared at the desk. The yellow folder was there, but it was skewed. I had placed it parallel to the edge of the laptop. Now, it was rotated, maybe 15 degrees. My heart hammered a rhythm against my ribs. Paranoia. I told myself, you bumped it when you stood up. I walked over to the desk. I looked at the papers inside. They looked undisturbed. I took a deep breath. Stop it, Riley. You are seeing ghosts. I sat down. I unlocked the computer. I had work to do. I had a crisis to manage. I did not have time to psychoanalyze the angle of a folder on a desk in a suburban guest room. But as I began to type, a cold feeling settled in my gut. It was the instinct that had kept me employed and alive for 7 years. The instinct that said, something is wrong. I pushed it down. I had a deadline. I focused on the screen, on the scrolling lines of code and the urgent messages from the director. I buried myself in the work, letting the basic work files consume me, ignoring the silent house around me. I did not know it then, but that was the last quiet moment I would have. The clock was ticking, not just on the threat overseas, but on the life I had built here. I typed a response to Vance on it, mobilizing analysis now. I had no idea that downstairs, the router logs would later show a massive spike in upload traffic. I had no idea that while I was drinking my water, a seed had been planted that would grow into a forest of thorns by morning. I just kept typing, believing that the lock on the door was enough. The transformation of my childhood bedroom into a secure operating post was a process I could do in my sleep. Though doing it under the roof of the people who changed my diapers added a layer of surreal friction to the task. I cleared the bedside table, sweeping away a decorative vase filled with dusty fake lavender and a stack of Reader's Digest magazines from the late 90s, in their place. I set up the perimeter of my real life. I laid out the equipment with the precision of a surgeon arranging instruments. First came the laptop, a matte black brick that weighed twice as much as a consumer model because of the reinforced casing and the shielded hardware inside. Next was the biometric hard drive, a solid-state brick the size of a deck of cards that required my thumbprint to even mount to the operating system. Then came the token, a small RSA key that generated a new 6-digit access code every 60 seconds. Without that changing number, the laptop was just a paperweight. I sat on the edge of the bed and plugged the hard drive into the laptop. The connection chime was the only sound in the room. I initiated the VPN tunnel, watching the command line scroll green text against a black background as it handshook with the servers in Northern Virginia. Connection established. Encryption level top secret /SCI. I exhaled. For a moment, the floral wallpaper and the smell of old potpourri faded. I was back in the stream. The data packets flowed across the screen, painting a picture of a deteriorating situation in Eastern Europe that was going to make the morning news cycle look like a fairy tale. I opened the physical briefing packet I had printed at the office, the one I had debated bringing at all. These were the basic work files I had lied about. In reality, They were satellite reconnaissance logs and financial transaction records linking a shell corporation to a blacklisted arms dealer. I needed to cross-reference the timestamps on the logs with the bank transfers. It was tedious. Manual work that required focus. I spread the papers out on the small desk, creating a fan of incriminating data. I had just found a discrepancy in the shipping manifest when 3 sharp knocks rattled the doorframe. Riley. "Open up." It was my mother. Her voice was not asking. It was demanding. It was the tone she used when I was 12 and had forgotten to take out the recycling. I froze. My hand hovered over the papers. I checked the time on the corner of my screen. It was barely 7 in the evening on Saturday. I had been working for 6 hours straight since the emergency text from Director Vance. "Just a minute. Mom?" I called out. I quickly minimized the classified windows on my screen. Bringing up a generic spreadsheet I kept open for exactly this purpose. It was a dummy file, filled with meaningless numbers about office supply procurement. I stood up and cracked the door open 3 inches. Elaine West stood there, holding a plate of sliced cheese and grapes. She looked past me, trying to peer into the room. "We are watching a movie downstairs," she said, thrusting the plate toward me. "And you have been in here all day. It is antisocial. Riley, I have to finish this." "Mom, I told you, it is a deadline." "On a Saturday?" She scoffed. "Since when does the government work on weekends? I thought you all clocked out at 4 on Fridays." I felt the familiar heat rising in my neck. The stereotype, the dismissal. The world does not stop on weekends. "Mom," she rolled her eyes. "Grant says you are just avoiding us. Logan says you are probably just watching Netflix in here and pretending to work to feel important." I gripped the door handle tighter. "I am not watching Netflix. I am working." "Well, come down and eat. You can bring your whatever it is, your files, bring them to the coffee table. We won't bother you." I almost laughed. The idea of laying out classified transaction logs on the coffee table next to the popcorn bowl while my family watched a romantic comedy was so absurd it hurt. "I cannot do that." I said, "Why not?" "Because I cannot." She narrowed her eyes. "Is it illegal?" "Mom, it is just privacy rules. Client privilege. You do not have clients. Riley, you have bosses." I took a deep breath. "Look, I will be down in an hour." "Okay, just let me finish this section." She sighed, a long, dramatic exhale that signaled I was ruining her vision of the perfect family weekend. "Fine, an hour. But if you are not down there, I am sending your father up with the spare key." The threat hung in the air as she turned and walked away. I closed the door and locked it again. The click of the privacy lock felt pathetically insufficient. Spare key. I had forgotten about the spare key. They had no concept of a locked door meaning "do not enter." To them, a locked door was just a challenge to their authority. I went back to the desk. The adrenaline from the confrontation made my hands shake slightly. I needed to calm down. I needed to focus. The numbers on the page were blurring together. I worked for another 40 minutes, but the rhythm was broken. I could hear the muffled sounds of the television downstairs, the occasional burst of laughter. They were having a normal Saturday. I was hunting ghosts in a ledger. Then came the second interruption. This time, there was no knock. The doorknob just rattled violently. "Riley, come on." It was Logan. I saved my work and went to the door again. When I opened it, my brother was leaning against the wall, a beer in his hand, a smug grin on his face. "Mom sent the cavalry," he said. "Come on, super spy. Time to rejoin the civilian population." I rubbed my temples. "Logan, I am busy. Doing what?" He tried to push past me into the room. "Let me see. Maybe I can help. I am pretty good with Excel." I blocked his path with my body. "It is not Excel." "Logan, and you cannot come in." He laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "You are so intense. You know, Dad thinks you are making it all up. He thinks you are actually just a mid-level HR rep who is embarrassed about her job title. So you invented this basic work files mystery to sound cool." I stared at him. "Is that what you think?" "I think you take yourself way too seriously," Logan said, taking a sip of his beer. We are your family. Riley, we do not care if you are boring. You do not have to pretend to be handling the nuclear launch codes. I am not pretending anything, I said, my voice dropping an octave, and I need you to leave me alone. Logan held up his hands in mock surrender. Okay, chill out. But seriously, Mom is getting upset. Just come down for 10 minutes. Show face. Then you can come back up here and play secret agent. He turned and walked toward the stairs. I watched him go, feeling a mixture of anger and exhaustion. They were relentless. They were like water, seeping into every crack, eroding my defenses. I looked back at the desk. The yellow folder with the handwritten notes and the printed logs was still splayed open. I should put it away. I should lock it in the bag. That was the protocol. That was the rule. But if I took the time to organize the papers, file them back into the folder, put the folder in the bag, and lock the bag, it would take 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, my mother might actually come up with the spare key. I just needed to go down, drink a glass of water, smile at them, and come back. 10 minutes. They respect a deadbolt. I thought, I have the key in my pocket. No one comes up here. I made a decision, a bad one. It was the kind of decision born of fatigue and the specific, unique pressure of wanting to get your family off your back. I left the papers on the desk. I did not close the yellow folder. I did not put it in the bag. I just left them there, face up, covered in dense text and numbers. I grabbed my phone, stepped out of the room, and locked the door from the outside. I tugged on the handle to check it. It held firm. I went downstairs. The living room was warm and loud. My father was in his armchair, criticizing the plot of the movie on the TV. My mother was on the sofa, knitting something shapeless and gray. Tessa was asleep on the other end of the couch. There she is, my father boomed. The ghost returns. I forced a smile. I can stay for a little bit. Good, my mother said. Sit. Logan was just telling us about his new marketing campaign. It is fascinating. I sat in the stiff wooden chair by the window, keeping myself slightly apart from the circle. Logan was standing by the fireplace, typing on his phone. He did not look like he was telling a story. He looked like he was working. So, Riley, my father said, turning his attention to me, this basic stuff you are doing, what is the end game? You verify the files. And then what? They get archived in some basement like in that Indiana Jones movie. Something like that? Dad, I said, it is just data verification, and they pay you for this. He chuckled. Your tax dollars at work. Everyone, verification of the verification. I bit the inside of my cheek. I was thinking about the shipping container I was tracking. If I was right, it contained enough precursor chemicals to level a city block. If I verified the data, a tactical team would intercept it in a port in Hamburg. If I failed, or if I was too slow, it would vanish into the European trucking network. But to Grant West, I was just wasting money. Sure, Dad, I said, it is very bureaucratic. I looked over at Logan. He was not watching the movie. He was not listening to Dad. He was texting furiously. His thumbs moved with a speed that was almost impressive. Who are you talking to? I asked. It was a reflex, an analyst's question. Logan jumped slightly. He looked up, his eyes wide for a fraction of a second before he composed himself. Just a client, he said smoothly. The toaster guys. They are panicking about a font choice. You know how it is. Urgent work stuff. He smirked at me, throwing my own excuse back in my face. But something was off. Logan's agency did not handle crisis management on Saturday nights, and he did not look annoyed, like he usually did when clients bothered him. He looked hungry. He finished the text and slid the phone into his pocket. Then, he looked at me. His gaze lingered for a moment, then drifted upward, toward the ceiling, toward the second floor. I followed his eyes. He was looking at the spot where my room would be. You should probably get back to it. Riles, Logan said, his voice casual. Do not want to leave your files lonely. It was a throwaway comment, a joke, but the way he said it made the hair on my arm stand up. It was too specific. I stood up. Yeah, I should. I walked toward the stairs. As I climbed, I looked back down. The family had turned back to the TV, but Logan was still standing by the fireplace. He had taken his phone out again. He was not looking at the screen. He was watching me climb the stairs. I reached the landing and walked to my door. I unlocked it and stepped inside. The room was exactly as I had left it. The papers were on the desk. The laptop was humming. I sat down, my heart beating a little faster than it should have. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Logan was just being a jerk. But as I looked at the papers, the basic work files that laid out the blueprint of a federal investigation, I felt a sudden, sharp regret. I should have locked them up. I reached out and gathered the papers, shuffling them back into a neat stack. I put them into the yellow folder. Focus, Riley. I whispered to myself. Ignore them. I did not know it then. But the clock had already started. The confidence of my family, their absolute certainty that they could do whatever they wanted without consequence, was about to collide with a world that did not care about their feelings. I went back to work, typing into the encrypted console. Downstairs, the movie played on, and somewhere in the invisible digital ether, a message from Logan's phone was traveling to a server, carrying a promise that would cost us all everything. I worked until my eyes burned. Around 2 a.m, I finally closed the laptop. I was exhausted. I left the yellow folder on the desk again. I was in the room now. I was going to sleep here. The door was locked. I was the guard dog. I fell asleep to the sound of the wind rattling the window pane, dreaming of shipping containers and black water. I did not hear the footsteps in the hall. I did not hear the soft, metallic click of a lock being tested. I slept the sleep of the righteous, unaware that the walls of my fortress had already been breached by the people who were supposed to be inside them with me. Sunday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The sky was a pale, innocent blue, washing out the gray tension of the night before. I woke up with a headache that sat behind my eyes like a physical weight. A remnant of the hours spent staring at encrypted transaction logs. I needed air. I needed to reset my biological clock before diving back into the abyss of the data stream. I looked at the time. It was 6:30 in the morning. The house was silent. My parents were heavy sleepers, and Logan usually didn't surface until noon on weekends unless there was money involved. I dressed in my running gear. Moving quietly, I checked the room one last time. The laptop was closed on the desk. The yellow folder, the one I had foolishly left out the night before, was sitting right next to it. I hesitated. Protocol screamed at me to lock everything in the biometric case, but I was just going for a run. 45 minutes, tops. The door had a lock. I had the key. I stepped out into the hallway, pulled the door shut, and listened for the click. It was solid. I locked it with the key, twisted the knob to verify, and pocketed the brass key in my zippered shorts pocket. Secure. I went downstairs, drank a glass of water, and slipped out the back door. The run was brutal and necessary. I pounded the pavement of Arbor Ridge, letting the cold air burn my lungs. I ran until my legs felt like lead, trying to outpace the anxiety that had been gnawing at me since I arrived. I visualized the data patterns I'd been analyzing. I ran through simulation models in my head. For 45 minutes, I was not a daughter or a sister. I was a machine, processing oxygen and information. I turned back onto my parents' street around 7:15. My heart rate was high. My skin slick with sweat. I felt better, sharper. I walked up the driveway, stretching my calves. The house looked peaceful. The curtains were still drawn. I entered through the kitchen. It was empty. The coffee pot was gurgling, signaling that my mother was awake, but she wasn't in the room. I grabbed a towel from the mudroom and headed for the stairs. All I wanted was a shower and then back to the desk. I would finish the analysis by noon, send the final packet to Director Vance, and then endure the rest of the Sunday roast with a clear conscience. I reached the top of the landing. I stopped. My breath hitched in my throat. A sudden, violent halt to the rhythm of my breathing. The door to the guest room. I had locked it. I had tested the handle. I had felt the bolt slide home. It was open, not wide open, just a crack, a sliver of darkness against the white frame, maybe 2 inches. But in my world, 2 inches is a canyon. 2 inches is a breach. 2 inches is the difference between safety and a catastrophic compromise. My blood ran cold. The sweat on my skin suddenly felt like ice water. My heart, which had been pumping hard from the run, skipped a beat and then hammered against my ribs with a new, terrified cadence. I didn't run. I walked forward slowly, my ears straining for sound. Silence. I pushed the door open with my fingertips. The room was exactly as I feared, yet confusingly intact. The bed was still unmade. The chair was pushed in. My eyes snapped to the desk. The laptop was there, closed, black, silent. The biometric briefcase was there. But the yellow folder was gone. The space where it had been was empty. The wood of the desk seemed to scream at me. I spun around, checking the floor. Maybe it fell. Maybe a draft blew it. No. My stomach turned over. I felt physically sick. A wave of nausea rising in my throat. I looked at the lock on the door. There were no scratches, no signs of forced entry. The spare key. My mother's voice from the night before echoed in my head. I am sending your father up with the spare key. I turned and ran. I didn't care about the noise now. I thundered down the stairs, skipping the last 2 steps. I hit the hallway floor and rounded the corner into the living room. The scene before me was so domestic, so normal, that it was horrifying. My family was gathered in the living room. Sunlight streamed through the bay windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. My mother was sitting on the floral sofa, a mug of tea in her hand. My father was in his recliner, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. Logan was sitting on the coffee table, leaning forward, and there, spread out across the polished oak of the coffee table like a Sunday puzzle, were my files. The yellow folder lay open, discarded to the side. The pages my notes, the printed transaction logs, the satellite coordinates, the names of shell companies linked to a terrorist financing network were laid out in rows. They were touching them. My father was holding a sheet of paper, squinting at it. My mother was tracing a line on a chart with her manicured finger. "Stop," I said. My voice came out as a whisper, strangled by shock. I took a breath and screamed, "Stop!" They all jumped. My father dropped the paper he was holding. My mother spilled a little tea on her saucer. "Riley," my mother gasped, clutching her chest. "Good Lord, you nearly gave me a heart attack. Why are you screaming?" I marched into the room. I felt like I was vibrating. Every nerve ending was on fire. "Get away from the table," I ordered. My voice was shaking, not with fear, but with a rage so white-hot it blinded me. "Do not touch those papers. Step away. Now," my father frowned. Retrieving the paper he had dropped, he looked at me over his glasses, his expression one of annoyance, not guilt. "Calm down, Riley," he said, his voice deep and dismissive. "There is no need for histrionics. We are just having coffee." "You broke into my room," I said. I was standing over the table now, my hands hovering over the documents, terrified to touch them and contaminate the chain of custody even further, but desperate to shield them. "You stole my files." "We did not steal anything," my mother said, looking hurt. She set her tea down. "We live here, Riley. This is our house. And I told you, I just wanted to understand. You are so secretive. We just wanted to see what these basic files were so we could connect with you. It is about family, Riley." "Family," I choked out the word. "You broke a lock to invade my privacy. That is not family. That is a crime." "Oh, stop it," Logan said. I looked at him. He was the only one not looking at me. He was looking at his phone. He was holding it directly over one of the documents, a list of high-value transaction codes. "What are you doing?" I asked. The air left my lungs. Logan didn't look up. He just adjusted the angle of his phone. "I'm just reading it. Sis, relax. It is just a bunch of numbers." I saw the interface on his screen. It wasn't the camera app. It was a scanning app, a document scanner, the kind that converts images to high-resolution PDFs and uploads them to the cloud instantly. He was digitizing it. "Put the phone down." "Logan," I said, My voice was deadly quiet now. I was trained for high-pressure de-escalation, but I had never had to de-escalate my own brother committing a felony in his pajamas. Delete that image. Now. Logan laughed. He tapped the screen. Saved. You are being paranoid, he said, finally looking at me with a smirk. I am just proving a point. You act like this is national security stuff. But look at this. It is just banking codes. It is boring. I bet I could Google half of this. He reached for another page. Do not touch it. I lunged forward. Grabbing his wrist, Logan yanked his hand back, his face darkening. Do not touch me. Riley, you are crazy. You are actually crazy. Grant, do something, my mother said, looking at my father. She is assaulting him. Dad stood up, his face red. Riley, that is enough. You are behaving like a child. We raised you better than this. Apologize to your brother. I looked around the room. I looked at their faces. They were angry. They were indignant. They truly believed they were the victims here. They believed that because we shared a last name, they owned everything I had. They owned my privacy, my dignity, and my work. They had no idea what they were looking at. They saw numbers. I saw a kill list. I saw a funding stream for a dirty bomb. You have no idea what you have done, I said, my voice trembling. This isn't a game. These aren't just papers. This is classified intelligence. By reading this, by touching this. Logan snorted. Classified. Right. Like the time you said your diary was classified when you were 12. Get over yourself. Riley, it is basic work files. You said so yourself. I stared at him. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They didn't believe me, even now, with the evidence right in front of them. They didn't believe me. They thought I was playing pretend. They thought I was a sad, lonely woman inventing a drama to feel special. And because they didn't believe me, they felt safe. They felt entitled. I looked at the table again. I needed to assess the damage. I needed to see exactly what they had exposed. My eyes scanned the mess, the yellow folder, the papers, and then I saw it. It was sitting near the edge of the table, half hidden under a coaster. It was a small silver USB dongle. It wasn't mine. I froze. I looked from the device to Logan. He saw my gaze. For the first time, the smirk faltered. His hand twitched, instinctively moving toward the device. I looked back at the laptop bag upstairs in my mind's eye. The laptop I had left closed. The dongle wasn't for a phone. It was a USB-C drive, a hardware interface tool. A cold clarity washed over me, silencing the panic. You didn't just take the papers, I said softly. Logan shifted in his seat. I do not know what you are talking about. You went into the room, I said, piecing it together. You took the papers. But before that you tried to plug that into my laptop. I pointed at the silver device. My mother looked confused. What is that? A flash drive? Logan stood up, grabbing the device and shoving it into his pocket. It is nothing. Just a work thing I had in my pocket. I dropped it. You tried to access the machine, I said. You tried to mount an external drive to a government-issued, encrypted asset. I didn't, Logan shouted, his face flushing. And even if I did, nothing happened. The screen just stayed black. It is a stupid computer anyway. The admission hung in the air. He had tried. He had physically attempted to breach the hardware. That wasn't curiosity. That wasn't family bonding. That was an attack. And the moment he tried to plug that drive in, the laptop's internal sensors would have logged a physical intrusion attempt. The silent alarm. My heart stopped. If the laptop logged a physical breach attempt, and then the basic files were removed from the secure perimeter, the Sentinel system wasn't just a passive observer, it was a tripwire. I looked at my watch. How long had they been down here? How long since Logan touched the laptop? 30 minutes, 40. I looked at my father, who was still holding the paper. I looked at my mother, who was shaking her head at my rudeness. I looked at Logan, who was clutching his phone like a weapon. You need to put everything down, I said. My voice was devoid of emotion now. The fear was gone, replaced by a terrifying certainty. Riley, stop bossing us around. My father grumbled. I am not bossing you around. Dad, I said, I am warning you. Warning us of what Logan sneered. Is the Grim Reaper coming? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Because at that exact moment, the sound cut through the suburban morning like a knife. It was the sound of tires screeching on asphalt. Not one car, many cars, heavy cars. The squeal of brakes was followed by the heavy, rhythmic thud of car doors slamming. 1, 2, 4, 6. My mother looked toward the window. Who on earth is driving like that? She stood up and walked to the bay window. She pulled back the lace curtain. Her hand flew to her mouth. Grant, she whispered. Grant, look. My father stood up and went to the window. Logan stayed on the table, looking at me. His arrogance was starting to crack, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. What did you do? Logan asked me. I didn't do anything. I said, looking him dead in the eye. You did. Outside. The world had turned black. Black SUVs, black uniforms, men with rifles moving across the lawn with the fluid speed of predators. My father turned around, his face the color of ash. Riley. He stammered, Riley. There are men with guns in the driveway. I didn't move. I stood perfectly still, watching the papers on the table. I know. I said. The front door didn't just open. It exploded inward. The sound was deafening. A wood-splintering crash that shook the floorboards. My mother screamed. The hallway filled with shouting. Federal agents' hands, show me your hands. The peaceful Sunday was over. The boundary had been crossed. And now, the deadbolt. The one thing they respected was lying in splinters on the floor. The moment I saw the silver USB dongle in Logan's hand, the world around me seemed to slow down. It was a physiological shift I had experienced only a handful of times in my career, usually during live-fire exercises or when a threat assessment turned red on the monitor. The emotional part of my brain, the part that loved my mother's cooking and wanted my father's approval, shut down completely. It was severed, cauterized, and replaced by the cold, binary logic of the Sentinel protocol. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not lunge at him again. My right hand moved instinctively to the side of my smartphone. It was a movement I had practiced thousands of times. A muscle memory burned into my nervous system. I pressed the volume up button twice, the volume down button twice, and then held the power button for exactly 3 seconds. It was not a call to 911. It was not a text to my boss. It was a silent, hard-wired duress signal that bypassed the local cell towers and pinged directly to the nearest federal threat management server. It was a signal that meant one thing: asset compromised, immediate extraction required. The phone vibrated once, a short, sharp buzz against my palm. The signal was sent. The clock had started. I looked at my family. They were no longer my family. In the eyes of the protocol I had just activated, they were unsecured civilians inside a compromised perimeter. They were potential hostiles. They were liabilities. Riley, my mother asked, her voice trembling. Why are you looking at us like that? You look like you want to kill us. I did not answer her question. I stepped back, creating a defensible distance between myself and the coffee table. My voice, when I spoke, was unrecognizable. It was stripped of all inflection, all warmth, all daughterly hesitation. It was the voice of the state. Put the papers down, I said. It was not a request. It was a command. My father bristled. He stood up straighter, puffing out his chest in that way he always did when he felt his authority was being challenged in his own living room. Now you listen here, young lady, he barked. I have had just about enough of this attitude. We are your parents. You do not give orders in this house. Grant, she is scaring me. My mother whined, clutching her knitting needles like a shield. Riley, stop it, Logan said. He was still holding his phone. He had not deleted the image. In fact, his thumb was hovering over the screen, likely switching apps to send the file he had just scanned. You are being ridiculous. It is just paper. Drop the phone. Logan, I said, do not touch the screen. Place it on the table, face down. Step away from the documents. Logan laughed. It was a nervous, incredulous sound. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Are you joking? He asked. You are actually joking, right? You think you can order me around? I am sending this to my cloud so you cannot delete it. I am going to show everyone how crazy you are. He tapped the screen. I saw his thumb make contact with the glass. I calculated the transmission speed. If he was on the house Wi-Fi, the upload would take less than 2 seconds. The data the canary packet I had unknowingly brought into the house was leaving the perimeter. You just committed a federal offense, I said. Logan rolled his eyes. Oh, shut up. He leaned back, crossing his legs. Mom, Dad, I said, shifting my gaze to them. Step away from the table. Move to the wall. Now. My mother looked at me with tears welling in her eyes. It was her ultimate weapon. The guilt trip. Con, she sobbed, using my childhood nickname. What are you doing? Are you going to hit us? Are you going to call the police on your own brother? We are just a family. We just wanted to be part of your life. Why do you hate us so much? I felt a flicker of the old Riley, the one who would have apologized and tried to soothe her, but the analyst in me crushed it instantly. There was no room for negotiation. I do not hate you, I said flatly, but you have breached a level 4 security containment. You have exposed classified material to an unsecured network. My father slammed his hand on the armrest of his chair. Stop speaking in that gibberish, he shouted. Level 4 containment. This is a living room in Arbor Ridge. There are no criminals here. Riley, there are no terrorists. There is just your family, who you are treating like dirt. The air in the room was thick with their indignation. They were so sure of their righteousness. They were so convinced that the rules of the world stopped at their front door. They believed that because they were good, suburban people who paid their taxes and mowed their lawns, they were exempt from consequences. I looked at my father. I looked at the red flush of his face, the anger of a man who had never been told no by his children. If there are no criminals here, I said, my voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, then today will reveal it. But if there are, they are about to be stopped. My father opened his mouth to yell again. He never got the chance. The sound began as a low hum, then escalated rapidly into a screeching roar that tore through the quiet neighborhood. It was the sound of heavy tires locking up on asphalt. Not one vehicle, many. They were close. They were right outside. My mother jumped. What is that? She turned toward the bay window again. I did not look. I knew what was out there. I knew exactly what a tactical response team sounded like when they were executing a rapid deployment. Outside, the screeching stopped, replaced by the heavy, synchronized thuds of doors slamming. The sound was distinct heavy steel doors, not the tinny slam of a sedan. My father moved to the window. He pulled back the curtain. His face went slack. The anger drained out of him instantly, replaced by a pure, unadulterated shock. Holy hell, he whispered. What? What is it? My mother asked, rushing to his side. Logan stood up, the phone still in his hand. He looked confused. Is that for us? The neighbors across the street would be at their windows by now. Mrs. Higgins, who watched everyone's recycling bins, would be peering through her blinds. They would see the black SUVs blocking the driveway. They would see the unmarked vans at the curb. They would see the men and women in full tactical gear moving across the lawn with weapons drawn. There must be a mistake, my mother said, her voice rising in panic. Grant, go tell them. Go tell them they have the wrong house. She turned to me. Riley, tell them this is a mistake. I stood perfectly still. My hands were at my sides, palms open, visible. I was following the protocol for a friendly asset in a hostile zone. It is not a mistake, I said. My father turned to me, his eyes wide with fear. Riley, what did you do? I did not answer. The heavy footsteps hit the porch. There was no doorbell. There was no polite knock. The command came from outside, muffled by the wood of the door but still audible, shouting with a force that commanded absolute obedience. Federal agents opened the door. My father took a step toward the hallway. I will talk to them. I will explain. Do not move. I shouted. It was the loudest I had spoken all morning. "Do not touch that door." "Dad, get on the ground." He froze, looking at me like I was a stranger. "Get on the ground, now." Logan looked at the door, then at his phone. Panic finally pierced his arrogance. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was trying to hide the pieces. "I didn't mean to," he stammered. And then, the world exploded. The front door did not just open, it disintegrated. A battering ram hit the lock mechanism with the force of a freight train. The wood splintered with a violence that sounded like a gunshot. The door swung inward, crashing against the hallway wall, shattering the framed family photos that hung there. Debris flew across the foyer. Through the broken doorway, they poured in, a stream of black uniforms, helmets, ballistic shields, the barrels of automatic rifles sweeping the room. "Police, get down. Get down. Hands. Let me see your hands." The noise was overwhelming. It was designed to be. It was shock and awe, intended to overload the sensory processing of anyone inside so they could not fight back. My mother screamed, a high, piercing sound of pure terror. She dropped to her knees, covering her head. My father stumbled back, tripping over the ottoman. He fell onto the carpet, his hands coming up instinctively to shield his face. "Don't shoot. We are unarmed. Don't shoot." Logan stood frozen by the coffee table, paralyzed. The phone was still in his hand. One of the agents, a towering figure with a face obscured by a visor, saw the device. "Drop the phone," the agent roared. His weapon trained on Logan's chest. Logan didn't move fast enough. He was shaking. Two agents closed the distance in a blur of motion. One of them hit Logan with a tackle that lifted him off his feet. He hit the floor hard, the air leaving his lungs in a whoosh. The phone skittered across the hardwood floor, spinning until it hit the leg of the sofa. My mother was sobbing hysterically. "Please. He is my son. Do not hurt him." I did not move. I slowly lowered myself to my knees. Interlocking my fingers behind my head, I kept my eyes on the floor. I knew the drill. Until the room was secure, everyone was a target, even me. Clear left, clear right. Secure the assets. The room was filled with the smell of ozone and sweat. The peaceful Sunday morning in Arbor Ridge had ceased to exist. In its place was a federal crime scene. An agent moved toward me. I saw his boot stop in front of my face. "Identify." He barked. "Riley West," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Sentinel Risk Intelligence. Clearance ID, Alpha 79. Zulu, I am the reporting officer." The agent paused. He tapped his earpiece. "Check on Alpha 79 Zulu." A moment of silence, then he lowered his weapon slightly. "Stand up." "West?" Slowly. I stood up. I looked around the room. My father was face down on the carpet, zip ties being tightened around his wrists. My mother was huddled in a ball, weeping. Logan was pinned to the floor by two agents, blood trickling from his nose where he had face-planted. The basic work files were still scattered on the coffee table, but the room wasn't the same. The boundary had finally been drawn. It was drawn in broken wood, shattered glass, and the cold, hard reality of federal law. They had wanted to know what I did. They had wanted to be involved. Now, they were. The silence that followed the breach was heavier than the noise that preceded it. The front door hung on a single hinge, a jagged maw of splintered wood exposing the foyer to the street. Inside the living room, the atmosphere had shifted from a cozy Sunday morning to a cold, sterile containment zone. The air smelled of cordite, drywall dust, and the sharp, metallic tang of fear. The tactical team moved with a choreography that was terrifying to witness if you were on the wrong side of it, but beautiful if you understood the discipline required. They did not scream anymore. The shouting was for shock and awe, for the initial domination of the space. Now, they were in control. The weapons' short-barreled carbines with holographic sights were lowered to the low-ready position, but the fingers remained indexed near the triggers. My family was on the floor. My father, Grant West, a man who had spent his life believing his status as a suburban homeowner gave him immunity from the chaos of the world, was face down on the Persian rug, His hands were zip-tied behind his back. He was hyperventilating, his face pressed into the wool, making small, confused noises. My mother, Elaine, was kneeling near the sofa, her hands clasped on top of her head. She was rocking back and forth, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. She looked small, frail. Logan lay near the coffee table, his cheek flat against the hardwood floor. He was not moving. His face was the color of old parchment. His eyes were wide open, staring at the boots of the agent standing over him. I stood in the center of the room, my hands still interlocked behind my head. Feet spread apart. I was the only one standing. Agent in charge. I called out. My voice was steady. It was the only steady thing in the room. A man in full tactical gear, his face obscured by ballistic eyewear and a balaclava, stepped forward. He had a patch on his chest that read HSI, Homeland Security Investigations. "Talk to me." "West," he said. I slowly lowered my hands to chest level, keeping them visible. "I am designating the coffee table as the primary contamination zone." I said, I was speaking the language of the job. It was the only way to separate myself from the people on the floor. The agent nodded. "Go on. Multiple classified documents. Hard copy. Origin Sentinel Risk Intelligence," I recited, pointing with an open hand. "Exposed to unauthorized personnel for approximately 40 minutes. "Who touched them?" the agent asked. He pulled a digital recorder from his vest. I took a breath. I had to do this. I had to be precise. Subject 1, male, 62, Grant West, handled document set 4, visual confirmation only, no electronic recording observed. I pointed to my father. He let out a sob. "Riley, please." I ignored him. Subject 2, female, 60, Elaine West, handled document set 2, visual confirmation only. I shifted my gaze to Logan. This was the hard part. This was the part that would end his life as he knew it. Subject 3, male, 31, Logan West, handled all document sets. The agent looked down at Logan. Did he image them affirmative? I said. Subject utilized a personal smartphone to scan document set 1. Specifically the transaction codes and the asset list. Visual confirmation of upload initiation. The agent signaled to 2 of his team members. "Secure the device, Faraday bag, now." An agent with gloves picked up Logan's phone from under the sofa with a pair of tongs, dropping it into a metallic, signal-blocking bag. He sealed it with a sharp rip of Velcro. "Is that it?" the lead agent asked. "No," I said. I looked at the coffee table, at the silver device Logan had tried to hide. I stepped closer, careful not to enter the perimeter they had established. "There is a secondary device, silver USB interface tool. Subject 3 attempted to insert it into my agency laptop prior to the document exposure." The lead agent walked over to the table. He leaned down, inspecting the silver dongle without touching it. He pulled a small flashlight from his vest and shone it on the device. He leaned closer. Then, he stood up. He looked at me, behind the ballistic glasses. His eyes were hard. "You said he tried to insert this." "Yes." I stopped him. Or rather, I arrived after the attempt. He claimed it did not mount. The agent turned to Logan. "Get him up." 2 agents hauled Logan to his feet. His knees buckled, and they had to hold him up by his armpits. He looked like he was going to vomit. "Logan West," the lead agent said. His voice was conversational, which was far scarier than if he had been shouting. "Do you know what this is?" Logan swallowed hard. "It is just a thumb drive. For storage." The agent tilted his head. "Just storage." "Yeah. Just for files. I wanted to make the text on the papers clearer. I was going to scan them to the drive. It was a stupid lie. You do not scan paper to a USB stick without a scanner." But Logan was drowning. He was grasping at straws. The agent reached out with a gloved hand and picked up the device. He held it up to the light. "This is not storage. Son," the agent said, "this is a rubber ducky injection tool." The room went silent. Logan blinked. "A what?" "It is a hardware interface designed to mimic a keyboard," the agent explained, his tone almost professorial. "You plug it in, And in less than a second, it executes a pre-written script. It bypasses firewalls. It installs backdoors. It exfiltrates keystrokes. He lowered the device and looked at Logan with genuine disgust. You do not buy this at the office supply store. You buy this on the dark web, or you get it from a handler. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had suspected it was an extraction tool, but a keystroke injector, that meant he wasn't just looking for files. He was looking for my credentials. He wanted my access. Logan, I whispered, what did you do? Logan shook his head frantically. No, I did not know. A guy gave it to me. He said it was just a booster. He said it would help me get the data faster. The agent signaled his team. Cuff him. Full restraints. Wait, Logan screamed as they spun him around. Wait, I am a marketing consultant. I did not know. The click of the handcuffs was loud and final. My mother wailed. He is a good boy. He didn't mean it, Riley. Tell them he didn't mean it. I could not speak. The betrayal was absolute. My brother hadn't just been snooping. He had brought a weapon into the house, a cyber weapon. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the front door. I cannot believe this. Let me through. I am a doctor. It was Tessa. I looked toward the foyer. My sister was pushing past a uniformed officer who was trying to secure the perimeter. She was wearing her white coat, her stethoscope still around her neck. She must have come straight from the hospital when the neighbors called her. Or maybe Mom had texted her before the breach. Ma'am, step back, the officer shouted. I am her sister. That is my family in there. Let her in, the lead agent commanded. Tessa rushed into the living room. She stopped dead when she saw the scene. She saw Dad on the floor. She saw Mom weeping. She saw Logan in handcuffs, being held by two large men. And she saw me, standing freely in the middle of it all. Her face twisted. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. She didn't run to Mom. She didn't run to Dad. She walked straight up to me. You? She hissed. Tessa. I started. She slapped me. It was not a hard slap, but it was shocking. It was the stinging, frantic slap of someone who had lost control. You did this, she screamed. Look at this. Look at our parents. Look at Logan. The lead agent stepped between us, pushing Tessa back gently but firmly. Back off. Ma'am. Tessa struggled against his arm. Her eyes locked on mine. You called these stormtroopers on your own family. Are you happy now? Are you finally important enough? Riley. I touched my cheek where she had hit me. I felt nothing. The adrenaline had numbed me. I did not call them. Tessa, I said quietly. The protocol called them. Oh, screw your protocol, she shouted. You destroyed this family. You destroyed this house for what? For some papers. She pointed at Logan, who was crying now, his head hanging low. Look at him. You are sending your brother to prison because he looked at your homework. He didn't just look. I said, he tried to hack a federal system. He is an idiot, Tessa yelled. He is your little brother. You solved this in the family. You do not bring this. She gestured to the agents, to the guns, to the broken door. I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had always been the golden child, the one who saved lives. I realized then that she was just as blind as the rest of them. To her, the law was something that applied to other people, to poor people, to bad people, not to the Wests. I didn't destroy the house. Tessa, I said. My voice was calm, contrasting sharply with her hysteria. Then who did she demanded? I pointed at the coffee table. I pointed at the silver dongle in the agent's hand. I pointed at the papers scattered like confetti. The person who touched what they were told not to touch. I said, they destroyed it. I locked the door. They broke it down. Tessa stared at me, her chest heaving. You are a monster. Maybe, I said, but I am a monster who follows the rules. The lead agent cleared his throat. He had been listening, watching. He seemed unimpressed by the family drama. Ms. West, he said to me, we have the physical assets secured. We have the electronic devices. Thank you. I said, I assume you will transport the subjects to the field office for processing. He nodded. But there is a change in the operational scope. I frowned. What do you mean? The agent reached into his vest and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it. It was a warrant. But it wasn't just a seizure warrant for the leaked documents. Based on the nature of the device found on Subject 3, he said, gesturing to Logan, and the initial intel we just received from Cyber Command regarding the IP address his phone was communicating with, this is no longer just a spill containment. He looked at my father, then at my mother, and finally at me. We have authorization for a full domiciliary search. We are not just taking the phones, Ms. West. We are taking everything, every hard drive, every computer, every scrap of financial paper in this house. My father lifted his head from the carpet. What you cannot do, that I have client files, I have tax records. You should have thought about that before you let a compromised espionage tool into your network, the agent said coldly. He raised his radio to his mouth. Control, this is team leader. Upgrade to full site exploitation. Bring in the forensics truck. I want this house stripped to the studs. If it stores data, it goes in a bag. Forensics truck, Tessa whispered. She looked around the room, the reality finally sinking in. I looked at Logan. He had stopped crying. He was staring at nothing. He knew what they would find. The agent turned back to me, and Ms. West. Yes, you are coming with us too. Debriefing, and until we clear you, you are relieved of your status, badge and gun, if you have one. I nodded. I expected this. I reached into my pocket and handed him my badge. I watched as more agents poured through the broken door. They carried boxes. They carried tools to pry open floorboards. They carried the machinery of the state, designed to disassemble a life piece by piece. My mother was sobbing into Tessa's coat. My father was being hauled to his feet. I stood alone in the middle of the ruin. The basic work files were being bagged and tagged. My secret was out. My job was gone. My family was in handcuffs. And the worst part. As I watched them drag Logan out the door, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt relieved. Because for the first time in my life, they finally understood that when I said no, I actually meant it. The interrogation room at the Homeland Security Field Office was not designed for comfort. It was a box of gray acoustic tiles and brushed steel, illuminated by fluorescent lights that hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. I sat on one side of the metal table, my hands resting flat on the cold surface. I had been there for 6 hours. No phone, no badge, no contact with the outside world. I was not in handcuffs, but I was not free. I was in the purgatory reserved for agents who become liabilities. The door opened, and Director Vance walked in. He was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite, with eyes that had seen too much and forgiven nothing. He was followed by a woman I did not recognize, sharp suit. Sharper eyes, carrying a tablet, internal affairs or counterintelligence. Riley, Vance said, sitting down opposite me. He did not smile. Director, I replied, this is Agent Miller from Counterespionage, Vance said, gesturing to the woman. Miller didn't introduce herself. She just placed the tablet on the table and tapped the screen. Let us go over the timeline again. Ms. West, Miller said. Her voice was dry. Professional. I repeated it. The arrival, the setup, the deception about the basic work files, the run, the discovery, the breach. I did not hide my mistake. I left the physical documents unsecured on the desk, I said, staring at the wall. I violated protocol. I assumed the lock on the door and the presence of family were sufficient mitigators. It was a lapse in judgment. I accept full responsibility for the exposure. Vance sighed. He leaned back in his chair. If this was just about you leaving papers on a desk, Riley, we would be having a disciplinary hearing, and you would be demoted to archiving for a year. But this isn't about the papers. I looked at him. What do you mean? Miller slid the tablet toward me. On the screen was a high-resolution photo of the silver USB dongle. Your brother, Logan West, she said. He had this, I know. The tactical team identified it as a keystroke injector. Do you know where he got it? Miller asked. He said he didn't know what it was. He said a client gave it to him. Miller tapped the screen again. A new image appeared. It was a chat log. "We cracked his phone," she said. "This is a conversation from 3 weeks ago, between your brother and a user handle, dataminer88. I read the text. It was banal at first. Then it turned chilling. "Logan, my sister is coming home next weekend. She works for Sentinel. High level. Dataminer. 88. Can you get access to her machine, Logan?" "Maybe. She locks everything up. She's paranoid." Dataminer 88. "I will send you a tool. Just plug it in. It does the rest. 10,000 if you get the handshake. 50 if you get the credentials." "Logan, done. I need the cash. This agency launch is bleeding me dry." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went cold. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't a prank. It was a contract. "Logan sold me out." I whispered. Vance nodded. "He sold you out for 50 grand. I closed my eyes. The image of Logan sitting on the coffee table, laughing at me, flashed in my mind. "You are so intense. Sis." He wasn't mocking me because he thought I was boring. He was mocking me because he thought he was smarter. He thought he was playing me. "But there is more," Miller said. She swiped the screen again. This time, it was a document. One of the documents from my basic work files packet. The one with the transaction codes. "Do you recognize this?" she asked. "Yes." I said. "That is the canary packet." Miller paused. She looked at Vance, then back at me. "You knew it was a canary packet?" she asked. I frowned. "What? No. I mean, I knew it was the packet I brought home. I used the term canary to describe the Vance cut me off. Riley. Listen to me. The file you were analyzing, the transaction logs, the shell companies, none of it was real." I stared at him. The hum of the lights seemed to get louder. "What?" "It was a trap." Vance said softly, "We have had a leak in the division for 6 months. Data was getting out. We couldn't find the source. So we created a series of fabricated intelligence packets, highly specific, highly enticing, and loaded with digital watermarks that trigger silent alarms the moment they are scanned or transcribed." He pointed to the tablet. "The packet you took home, packet Delta 9, was a canary trap. It was designed to catch a mole." My mouth fell open. "You used me as bait." We distributed the packets to 12 senior analysts. Vance said, his voice unapologetic, "We didn't tell you because we needed your reactions to be genuine. If you knew it was fake, you might have been careless or too careful. We needed to see who would sniff around it." I felt a wave of nausea. I had spent hours stressing over those numbers. I had lost sleep. I had fought with my family to protect them. And it was all a lie, a test. But here's the thing. "Riley," Miller interjected, "the trap wasn't meant for your family. It was meant for you, or your colleagues. We expected a leak from inside the office. We never expected the trigger to come from a suburban IP address in Maryland. So I didn't fail the test I asked. Confused. Technically, you failed physical security protocols," Vance said. "But practically, you just caught a fish we didn't even know was in the pond." He leaned forward. "Your brother triggered the alarm the second he scanned that page. But because it was a canary file, it didn't just upload the image, it backtraced the connection. We have the broker. We have dataminer 88. I sat back, my mind reeling. My brother was a criminal, a clumsy, greedy criminal who had walked right into a federal counterintelligence operation. But it didn't stop there. My mind began to race, replaying the last few years of interactions with my family, the requests, the comments, the jokes. I remembered my father, 6 months ago, asking about government procurement contracts. "Riley, you must know people who approve the vendors for the office supplies." Just a name, a nod. I remembered my mother, constantly asking about my travel schedule. "Where are you going exactly? Which hotel? Send me the itinerary so I don't worry." I remembered Tessa. I looked up at Miller. "What about my sister?" Miller swiped the tablet again. "We found this email on your father's computer. It is from Tessa to your dad. I read it. Subject: Riley's connections. Dad, I need that grant approved for the pediatric wing. The board is pressuring me. Riley has to know someone on the review committee. She works for Sentinel. They vet these things. Make her write the letter. If she won't do it, maybe we can find out who the contact is another way. I felt a physical pain in my chest. Sharp and agonizing. They were all in on it. Not necessarily the specific act of hacking my laptop that was Logan's freelance hustle, but the culture of exploitation. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a resource, a locked door they felt entitled to open because they shared my DNA. Tessa wasn't just the protective sister. She was a climber who wanted to use my clearance to grease wheels for her career. My father wasn't just a worried dad. He was a man drowning in debt who thought my government job was a golden goose he hadn't figured out how to cook yet. And my mother, she was the conductor. She orchestrated the guilt that kept me coming back, that kept me in the house, that kept me within reach. They are not just curious. I whispered, they are hungry. Vance nodded. That is the word. Hungry. He stood up and walked to the small window that looked out into the hallway. We have your family in holding cells 3, 4, and 5. They have been interviewed separately. And I asked, they are changing their tune. Miller said, they are not apologizing. Riley, they are blaming you. Of course they are, I said bitterly. Your father claims he had no idea what Logan was doing. But he admits he encouraged Logan to see if he could find any useful business intelligence in your papers. He says he thought it was harmless corporate espionage, not federal treason, as if that makes it better. And your mother, Vance added, turning back to me, she says you provoked them. She says you were so secretive, so arrogant, that you forced them to snooze. She calls it defensive parenting. Defensive parenting. I repeated, breaking into a classified briefcase is defensive parenting. Miller looked at me with a gaze that was almost sympathetic. Riley, we have enough to bury Logan. The CFAA charges, the Espionage Act violations he is looking at 20 years, minimum, your parents' conspiracy, obstruction, maybe accessory. Tessa is on the edge, but her emails show intent to solicit influence peddling. She paused. But for your file for your clearance review, we need to know one thing. What Vance placed his hands on the table. Do you think this was a one-time lapse? Or do you think you have been a target for them for a long time? I thought about the question. If I said it was a one-time lapse, I might save my parents some jail time. I might frame it as a momentary madness. But if I told the truth, if I admitted that my family had been probing my defenses for years, chipping away at my resolve, using guilt as a lockpick, I thought about the basic work files. I thought about how I had diminished myself, made myself small and boring, just to keep them safe, and they had hated me for it. They had mocked me, and then they had tried to rob me. I looked at Vance. It wasn't a lapse. I said clearly, it was a campaign. Miller typed something into her tablet. Explain. They have been grooming me. I said, the realization tasting like ash in my mouth. For years, they belittled my job to make me feel insecure, so I would share more to prove my worth. They created financial crises to see if I would use my access to help. They used emotional leverage to get physical access to my workspace. I looked up, my eyes dry. Logan didn't just decide to hack me yesterday. He has been waiting for the opportunity. He knew I was bringing work home because Mom made sure I knew I had to come home this weekend. She insisted. She said it was an emergency. Was there an emergency, Vance asked? No, I said. We just ate dinner and watched a movie. The emergency was getting me into the house. The room was silent. The implication hung heavy in the air. My mother had set the stage. My father had provided the distraction, and Logan had executed the strike. It was a coordinated intelligence-gathering operation, and the operators were my parents. Vance nodded slowly. He looked at me with a new respect. Okay, he said. That matches our assessment. He picked up the file. We are going to move forward with full prosecution. We are going to offer them a deal to roll over on the broker. But given the severity of the breach, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Riley, Miller said, you can go home. Not to Arbor Ridge. To your apartment in D.C. We will have a detail on you for a few days until the broker network is fully rolled up. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. Can I see them? I asked. Vance frowned. Is that a good idea? I said, I need them to know that I know. Vance hesitated, then nodded. Brief contact. Through the glass. No audio recording on your end. I walked down the hallway to the holding area. I stopped at cell 4. Logan was sitting on the bench, his head in his hands. He looked up when he saw me. His face was swollen from crying. Riley, he shouted, his voice muffled by the heavy glass. Riley, get me out of here. Tell them it was a joke. I stared at him. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a cold, distant pity. I shook my head slowly. I moved to the next window. My parents were in a larger holding room together. When they saw me, they rushed to the glass. Riley, my mother screamed, look at what you have done. Fix this. Call your boss. We are your parents. My father was red-faced, pounding on the glass. You ungrateful brat. After everything we did for you, you set us up. You brought those papers to trap us. I watched them. I watched their mouths move, spewing the same toxic entitlement that had poisoned every holiday dinner, every birthday, every phone call for the last decade. They didn't see a federal agent. They didn't see a breach of national security. They just saw a daughter who had refused to be a tool. I pressed my hand against the glass for a second. Then I turned my back on them. I walked away down the long, gray corridor, behind me. The muffled sounds of their screaming faded into the hum of the ventilation system. I walked out of the building into the cool night air of Washington, D.C. I was alone. I had no family. I had a career that was hanging by a thread. I had a life that had been stripped down to the studs. But as I hailed a cab, I realized something. I was safe. For the first time in 33 years, I was truly, completely safe. The threat wasn't foreign terrorists or cyber criminals. The threat had been sleeping in the guest room next to me. And now, the threat was neutralized. The decision to destroy my family was not made in a fit of rage. It was not a crime of passion. It was a calculated administrative necessity, executed with the same dispassionate efficiency I applied to risk assessments at Sentinel. In the 48 hours following the raid on my parents' house, the narrative began to form in two distinct directions. There was the version my family was trying to spin to their court-appointed attorneys, a misunderstanding, a family dispute gone wrong, a prank by a younger brother that got out of hand. They were leaning hard on the incompetence defense. They wanted to be seen as bumbling suburbanites who simply did not understand the gravity of the basic work files. Then there was my version, the truth. I did not go home to Arbor Ridge. I stayed in a secure hotel suite in downtown D.C., paid for by the agency while my apartment was swept for bugs. My first call was not to a therapist, but to Elias Thorne. Thorne was not a family law attorney. He was a shark who specialized in security clearance defense. He cost $800 an hour, and he was worth every penny. I sat across from him in his glass-walled office on K Street. I looked tired, but my mind was razor-sharp. I need to be clear. Elias, I said, sliding a retainer check across the mahogany desk. I am not here to mitigate the damage to my parents. I am here to ensure that my clearance review concludes that I was the target of a hostile intelligence operation, not a co-conspirator. Thorne looked at the check, then at me. He smiled, a cold, predatory expression. So we are throwing them to the wolves, he asked. I did not flinch. They are not wolves, I said. They are federal prosecutors. And my family put themselves in the den. I just want to make sure I'm not wearing the meat suit when the feeding starts. We established the strategy immediately. Total cooperation, full disclosure. I would not protect them. I would not hide the embarrassing details of their financial desperation or their manipulative behavior. I would hand over everything. That night, I began the audit. If my family was willing to sell my state secrets for $50,000, I needed to know what else they had sold. I logged into the credit monitoring services that I usually ignored. I requested full reports from all 3 bureaus. I sat in the hotel room, the glow of the laptop illuminating the sterile beige walls. and I started to scroll. It took me less than 20 minutes to find the first fracture. In 2019, a line of credit had been opened in the name of Riley J. West. It was a home improvement loan for $30,000. I did not own a home in 2019. I was renting a studio apartment in Arlington. I clicked on the details. The loan was secured against my parents' address in Arbor Ridge. But the primary borrower was me. The co-signer was Grant West. I closed my eyes and let the memory wash over me. 2019. That was the year my father had renovated the deck. I remembered him standing on the new mahogany planks, a beer in his hand, boasting about how he had moved some assets around to pay for it. He had asked me to sign something back then, a beneficiary confirmation for his life insurance, he had said. He had caught me as I was rushing out the door to catch a flight. Just sign here, honey. It just says you get the money if I die. I had signed it. I had signed my own credit warrant. I kept digging. There was a credit card opened 18 months ago, maxed out at $15,000. The billing address was a P.O. box in a town 10 miles from Arbor Ridge. The recovery email address was lwestmarketinggmail.com. Logan. I remembered the day he had asked for a picture of my driver's license. I am booking a surprise anniversary trip for Mom and Dad. He had said, I need your ID to put you on the flight manifest just in case you can make it. I had sent him the photo. I never went on the trip. There never was a trip. But a week later, Logan had bought a new suite of Apple computers for his agency. I sat there in the silence of the hotel room, looking at the numbers. $45,000 of debt in my name. Fraud, identity theft, wire fraud. They had been eating me alive for years. I was not a daughter to them. I was a host organism. The next morning, I walked into the Sentinel field office. I did not carry a weapon, but I carried a file that was just as lethal. I requested a meeting with Agent Miller. When I walked into the conference room, she looked surprised to see me. We are not scheduled for another interview until Thursday. Riley, she said. I know, I said, placing the folder on the table, but I found something during my personal security audit that goes to motive. Miller opened the folder. She looked at the credit reports. She looked at the highlighted transaction dates. She looked at the affidavit I had drafted, declaring under penalty of perjury that I had not authorized these accounts. She looked up at me, her eyes widening slightly. Your father forged your signature on a loan application. Yes, I said, and my brother used my identification to open a line of credit to fund his business equipment. Miller let out a low whistle. This changes the profile, she said. How? I asked. Though I knew the answer. It establishes a pattern of predatory behavior, she said. It proves they didn't just stumble into a crime this weekend. They have been exploiting your identity for financial gain for at least 4 years. It dismantles the accidental intrusion defense completely. She looked at me closely. Are you sure you want to submit this? She asked. Once this goes into the case file, we add bank fraud and aggravated identity theft to the indictment. That adds mandatory minimums. Your father could die in prison. I looked at the file. I thought about the deck I had paid for. I thought about the computers Logan was using to hack me. I am sure. I said, they did not hesitate to bankrupt me. I will not hesitate to document it. Miller nodded and slid the file into her evidence box. By Wednesday, the gravity of the situation had finally penetrated the delusion field that surrounded my family. My lawyer, Thorne, called me in the afternoon. The public defender for your brother reached out, Thorne said, his voice smooth and professional. He sounds rattled. Apparently, Logan has realized that this is not going to be a slap on the wrist. What did he say? I asked. He is offering a proffer, Thorne said. Logan wants to cut a deal. He is willing to say that he was pressured by outside forces. He is trying to imply that maybe you were involved, that maybe you left the files out on purpose to help him. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He is trying to frame me. He is drowning. Riley, Thorne said, he is grabbing onto anything that floats. But do not worry. We have the timeline. We have your report. And now, thanks to that credit card fraud evidence you submitted, His credibility is non-existent. The fact that he would try, though, that was the final nail. Even now, facing federal prison, Logan was trying to drag me down with him. That evening, the barrage began. I had blocked their numbers. But my mother found a way. She used a neighbor's phone. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the message. It was a wall of text. Riley, it is Mom. Please, I am begging you. Answer the phone. Your father is having chest pains. Logan is in a cell with violent people. How can you let this happen? We are your family. We changed your diapers. We paid for your college. That was a lie. I was on a scholarship. You are cold. Riley, you have let that job turn you into a robot. Please, just tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you gave us permission. If you do not, we will lose the house. We will lose everything. Is your career worth your mother's life? Please, baby, come home. I read the message 3 times. I dissected it like an intelligence intercept. Manipulation tactic. Health scare. Dad's chest pains. Manipulation tactic. Guilt diapers. College. Manipulation tactic. Character assassination robot. Cold. Manipulation tactic. Ultimatum. Lose the house. There was no apology. There was no admission of wrongdoing. There was only a demand that I commit perjury to save them from the consequences of their own greed. I typed a reply. I did not address the chest pains. I did not address the house. I addressed the reality. I do not make the law. I just do not stand outside it. I hit send. Then I blocked that number too. I sat in the hotel room, staring at the city lights. I felt a strange sense of lightness. The cord had been cut. It had been severed with a rusted knife, and it was jagged and bloody. But it was cut. The next morning, the twist came. I was called back to the field office. This time, Director Vance was smiling. It was a grim smile. But it was there. We found something. He said as soon as I sat down. Regarding the broker, I asked. Regarding the timeline, he corrected. He turned a monitor toward me. It showed surveillance footage from a coffee shop. The timestamp was from the Thursday before the weekend, 2 days before I arrived in Arbor Ridge. In the grainy footage, I saw Logan. He was sitting at a small table. Across from him was a man in a hoodie. I know that man, Vance said, pointing to the guy in the hoodie. We call him the vendor. He is a mid-level fence for corporate secrets. Mostly steals customer lists and proprietary algorithms. I watched the screen. Logan was talking animatedly. He looked desperate. He was gesturing with his hands. Then, the vendor reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, silver object, the USB dongle. He slid it across the table to Logan. Logan picked it up. He examined it. Then he nodded and put it in his pocket. Vance paused the video. This meeting took place 48 hours before you even entered the house, Vance said. I stared at the frozen image of my brother accepting the cyber weapon. He planned it. I whispered, it was not a crime of opportunity. Vance confirmed. He didn't just see the papers on Saturday and get curious. He was actively soliciting the tools to hack you before you even packed your bag. Vance leaned back. He told the broker that his sister was coming to town and that he would have access to the mainframe. He pre-sold the data. Riley. He took a $5,000 advance on Thursday. I felt sick. The dinner, the questions about my job, my mother's insistence that I come home. Did they all know, I asked? We are not sure if your parents knew about the specific meeting with the broker, Vance said. But we know Logan told them on Friday night that he had a solution to their financial problems coming up. He told them all he needed was for you to be distracted. The movie, the wine, the constant interruptions while I was working. It was an orchestrated operation. My family was a cell. This kills any chance of a plea deal for leniency. Vance said, this is conspiracy to commit espionage. This is premeditated. Logan is going away for a long time. I looked at the screen one last time. I looked at my brother's face. He looked so young, yet so corrupt. Do it, I said. Vance looked at me. You are the star witness. Riley, you know that. You will have to testify against him. You'll have to point to him in court and say he did this. I stood up, smoothed the front of my blazer, picked up my bag. I looked Vance in the eye. He's not my brother anymore, I said. He's a subject in an investigation, and I'm the analyst who found him. I walked out of the office. The legal chess match was over. They'd been trying to shove pieces around like it was checkers while I was mapping the board in 3 dimensions. They thought they could pressure me into silence. Instead, they'd handed me everything I needed, neatly compiled, conveniently documented, practically highlighted, and shoved it straight into the record. All I had to do was file it and let it speak, and I did. The fallout from the warrant action didn't stay trapped inside the legal system. In the suburbs of Arbor Ridge, information moves faster than fiber optics, carried on a current of gossip, self-righteousness, and willful ignorance. By Friday, 5 days after the breach, I'd become a pariah in a community I hadn't lived in for a decade. My phone, which I had cleared of all non-essential contacts, was receiving voicemails that bypassed my blocks through sheer volume. They came from aunts I saw once a year at Thanksgiving. They came from cousins who still lived in their parents' basements. The message was uniform, a chorus of indignation that ignored the facts in favor of feelings. Riley, this is Aunt Linda. I heard what you did to your mother, calling the police because she dusted your room. You should be ashamed. Blood is thicker than water. Riley, it is Cousin Mark. Dad says you are trying to put Grant in jail to get inheritance money. You are sick. They did not know about the keystroke injector. They did not know about the identity theft. They did not know about the credit cards opened in my name. To them, the narrative was simple. The cold, government daughter had turned on her loving, helpless parents over a stack of papers. I did not respond to them. I forwarded every voicemail, every text message, and every email to Elias Thorne. Put them in the harassment file. I told him, if they persist, send cease and desist letters, but the real offensive came from Logan. My brother was out on bail, his assets frozen, his passport surrendered, but he still had his phone, or at least, a burner phone that he had managed to acquire. And he still had his social media accounts, which were the lifeblood of his marketing agency. On Saturday morning, Thorne sent me a link. Do not react. Thorne warned in the attached message. Just read it. I clicked the link. It was a post on Logan's verified agency profile, titled, "The Price of Ambition: How My Own Sister Weaponized the Federal Government Against Her Family." It was a masterpiece of creative fiction. In the post, Logan described a simple family misunderstanding where he had accidentally moved some files to clean the coffee table. He claimed that I, in a fit of hysterical paranoia, had triggered a SWAT raid to punish them for not respecting my career. He painted himself as the victim of a tyrannical sibling who used her deep state connections to settle childhood scores. She watched from the corner while they put our mother in handcuffs. Logan wrote, "She didn't shed a tear. That is the kind of person she is. She cares more about her clearance level than the woman who gave her life." The post had 4,000 likes. The comments were vitriolic. Strangers were calling for my firing. They were calling me a traitor to the family unit. I felt a flash of heat in my chest, the urge to reply, to post the chat logs where he agreed to sell my access for $50,000. But I stopped. That was what they wanted. They wanted a fight in the mud. They wanted to make this a domestic squabble, he said. She said, because in a domestic squabble, the jury might be sympathetic to the crying mother. I picked up the phone and called Thorne. "Is this a violation of his bail conditions?" I asked. "It borders on it," Thorne said. "But it is definitely defamation per se, and it potentially violates the gag order regarding the specifics of the investigation. Take it down." I said, "Do not comment. Do not argue. Just hit him with a court order." Within 3 hours, the post was gone. In its place was a generic legal notice, but the damage was done. The court of public opinion had convened, and I was guilty. This social pressure began to squeeze Tessa. My sister was not named in the initial indictment, though she was a subject of interest due to her emails. However, she lived in the community. She worked at the local hospital. She called me on Sunday night. Her voice was tight, clipped. "I got pulled into the chief of surgery's office today." She said, I didn't say anything. Patients are talking. Riley, they are asking if I am related to the spy family on the news. They are asking if their medical records are safe with me. That is unfortunate. I said, unfortunate. She laughed. A high, brittle sound. It is a disaster. I have built this reputation for 10 years, and now I'm being looked at like I am part of some crime ring. You have to fix this. I cannot fix it. Tessa, yes, you can. She insisted. Mom has a plan. I gripped the phone tighter. Of course she did. What is the plan, I asked. Morbidly curious. Mom says that if you sign a statement and affidavit, I think saying that you verbally authorized them to look at the files. That this was all just a miscommunication about the scope of access. The prosecutors will drop the heavy charges. They might just get probation for mishandling information. I closed my eyes. They still didn't get it. They thought this was a parking ticket. Tessa, I said slowly. Logan used a hacking tool. He solicited a broker. That is not a miscommunication. He is your brother, she screamed. Who cares about the tool? You sign the paper. Riley, if you do not. Mom says they are going to sue you. Sue me for what? For emotional distress. For malicious prosecution. For the cost of the door you broke. I hung up. The absurdity was suffocating. They were trying to negotiate a hostage exchange, but they were the ones in the cage. An hour later, an email arrived from my mother's personal account. It was titled, A Path to Forgiveness. I opened it. It was a long, rambling letter. It detailed every sacrifice she had ever made, from the pain of childbirth to the cost of my braces. It painted a picture of a saintly mother betrayed by an ungrateful child. We are willing to forgive you. Riley, she wrote, we are willing to put this behind us and be a family again. All we need is for you to do the right thing. Sign the attached document. Tell the agents you overreacted. Tell them you gave us permission. If you do this, we will not pursue legal action against you for the damage to the house. We will welcome you back. Attached was a PDF, clearly drafted by a strip mall lawyer, titled Declaration of Authorized Access. I stared at the screen. They were not asking for mercy. They were offering me mercy. They truly believed they held the moral high ground. They believed that their parental status outranked federal law. It was not about love. It was about control. They needed to force me back into the role of the submissive child, the one who covers up the family mess. I forwarded the email to Agent Miller and Director Vance. Subject witness tampering/attempt to suborn perjury. Then, I opened a folder on my laptop that I had not looked at since the raid. When I had set up my secure room that weekend, I had not just relied on the lock. I was a threat analyst. I anticipated breaches. I had placed a small, motion-activated camera on the bookshelf, hidden between two old encyclopedias. It was battery-operated and recorded to a cloud server. I had forgotten about it in the chaos of the raid, but I had checked the footage yesterday. I watched the clip again. It was time-stamped Friday afternoon. While I was downstairs getting water before the final breach on Sunday, the video showed my mother walking up to the door. She did not knock. She pulled a key from her pocket. It was a master key, the kind that opens every interior door in a house. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. She did not look around for me. She went straight to the desk. She picked up the yellow folder. She flipped through it. Then she pulled out her phone and took a picture of the cover page. Then she put it back, smoothed the cover, and left the room, locking the door behind her. This was before Logan's scan. This was before the Sunday confrontation. She had been in there first. She had scoped it out. She had verified the target. I downloaded the clip. I attached it to a new email to Agent Miller. Reference case ID, Sentinel Breach 09. Additional evidence. Video confirmation of subject Elaine West bypassing physical security measures utilizing a master key unauthorized by the asset holder. Date, Friday. Preceding the primary event. I hit send. There would be no affidavit. There would be no forgiveness. I was handing them the rope they had used to bind me. The next day, the final pillar of their defense crumbled. I received a call from Agent Miller. Her tone was brisk, but I could hear a hint of satisfaction. "Your father has been busy," she said. "What did he do?" I asked. "He tried to call Judge Henderson. Do you know him?" "He is an old golfing buddy of Dad's." I said, "He sits on the county circuit court." "Well, your father called him from a burner phone. He asked Henderson to make a call to the federal prosecutor's office. He asked him to pull some strings and get the case dismissed as a domestic dispute. He hinted that he could help Henderson with his re-election campaign if this favor was granted." I rubbed my temples. My father was trying to bribe a judge. He was trying to use small-town influence on a federal espionage case. Henderson is not an idiot. Miller continued. "He reported the call immediately to the FBI. He recorded it." "Of course he did." I said, "We are adding 2 counts of obstruction of justice and 1 count of attempted bribery of a public official to your father's indictment." Miller said, "The bail is being revoked. We are picking him up within the hour." I felt a strange hollowness. My father, a man who prided himself on knowing how the world worked, had just destroyed himself because he refused to accept that he was not in charge. But the final blow landed on Logan, while the criminal case was churning. The market was reacting. Sentinel Risk Intelligence did not make a public statement, but the industry is small. Rumors leaked. The marketing agency that was fronting for a data broker was identified. On Tuesday, 3 days after Logan's defamation post, the exodus began. I watched it happen in real time on business news feeds. A major tech firm that had been Logan's biggest client released a statement. "We are terminating our contract with West Creative Strategies effective immediately due to security concerns." Then a regional bank followed suit. Then the landlord of his fancy office space filed for eviction due to a violation of the criminal activity clause in the lease. Logan's agency, the one he had built on credit card fraud and stolen valor, was evaporating. Thorne called me late Tuesday afternoon. Logan's lawyer just called. Thorne said, "The tone has changed." "How so?" "The defamation post is gone. The half-truth defense is gone. The agency is dead. His clients are suing him for breach of contract and demanding audits of their data. He is radioactive, Riley, and he is crying," Thorne said. "He wants to know if you will take a call. He says he wants to tell you the truth about the broker. He says he will give you everything if you just ask them to let him keep his laptop so he can try to save the business." I looked out the window of the hotel room. The sun was setting over D.C., casting long shadows across the monuments. "He doesn't want to apologize." I said, "He wants his laptop. He wants his toy back. Tell him no." "Thorne, tell him the laptop is evidence. Tell him the business is a crime scene. And tell him that the only person he should be talking to is the federal prosecutor." I hung up. My family had tried to bury me in gossip. They had tried to bribe the law. They had tried to manipulate my emotions. But they had forgotten the one rule I lived by. The rule of the analyst. Data does not lie. People do. And now, the data was speaking, and it was screaming their names. I turned away from the window. I had to prepare for the grand jury. I had to practice my testimony. I had to be ready to stand up in a room full of strangers and point a finger at the people who raised me. It should have been hard. It should have been heartbreaking. But as I looked at the video still of my mother holding that master key, her face twisted in a sneer of entitlement, I realized it was the easiest thing I would ever do. The legal term for what happened next is discovery. It is a sterile word, suggesting a scientific process of uncovering facts, like brushing dirt off a fossil. But in a federal espionage case involving family, discovery is not scientific. It is an autopsy. It is the process of cutting open the people you love and seeing exactly how rotten they are on the inside. For 3 weeks, I sat in a conference room with Elias Thorne and a team of paralegals, sifting through the digital debris of the West family. We had terabytes of data. We had chat logs, bank statements, deleted emails, and recovered voice memos. The narrative my family had tried to spin the story of the curious. Overbearing parents and the prankster brother dissolved within the first hour of review. What replaced it was something far darker. A story that made me nauseous, not because it was violent, but because it was so calculatingly transactional. The first domino fell when we cracked the encrypted partition on Logan's laptop. We knew about the chat with Data Miner 88 regarding the $50,000, but that was just the negotiation. What we found in a folder labeled Project Skyline, a folder Logan had tried to wipe 3 times, was the request for proposal. It was an email from the broker, dated 2 months prior. Subject access verification required. Body. We have a client interested in the Sentinel risk algorithms for the Eastern Seaboard shipping lanes. We know your sister is a senior analyst. We do not need the data yet. We need proof of access. If you can prove she has a live connection to the Tier 1 servers from a remote location, we will put you on a monthly retainer, $5,000 a month, plus bonuses for specific polls. I read the email twice. The room felt airless. Logan hadn't just seized an opportunity because I came home. He had been auditioning for a job. The job was to be my handler. He was trying to turn me into an unwitting asset, a cow he could milk for $5,000 a month. The basic work files I brought home were just the test. He needed to prove to his masters that he could breach my perimeter. That was why he needed the scan. That was why he tried the keystroke injector. He wasn't looking for text clarity. He was looking for the digital handshake that proved I was logged into the Sentinel mainframe. He was going to farm me, I whispered. Thorne looked up from a stack of papers. He looked grim. It gets worse, Riley. He slid a binder toward me. It was labeled Financial Forensics Grant and Elaine West. I opened it. I expected to see bad spending habits, maybe some credit card debt. What I saw was a catastrophe. My parents were not just in debt. They were insolvent. They had refinanced the house 3 times. They had taken out predatory loans with interest rates that should have been illegal. They owed money to banks, to credit unions, and to private lenders who did not look like the forgiving type. The total debt load was over $400,000. And then, I saw the text message from Logan to my father, dated 1 week before the raid. Dad, hold off on the bankruptcy filing. I have a solution. Riley is coming home. If I can pull off this contract, I get a signing bonus. It will cover the arrears on the mortgage. We just need to get her to open the bag. My father's reply came 2 minutes later. Make sure she stays for dinner. Your mother will handle the guilt trip. Just get what you need. I closed the binder. I felt a cold numbness spreading through my limbs. They knew. They claimed they didn't know about the hacking tool. They claimed they thought Logan was just cleaning up papers. But the texts proved they knew exactly what he was doing. They knew he was stealing something valuable enough to save the house. They had traded my career, my freedom, and my national security oath for a mortgage payment. That afternoon, I had to face Tessa. She had been subpoenaed for a deposition because she was not yet charged. She was fighting to keep her medical license. Her lawyer had requested a pre-deposition conference to clarify her position. I walked into the room. Tessa was sitting at the end of the long table. She looked tired. Her perfect doctor facade was cracking. Riley, she said, her voice trembling. I sat down. I did not say hello. I saw the emails. Tessa, I said, I saw where you asked Dad to pressure me for the committee letter. Tessa flinched. That was different. That was for the hospital. Was it? Or was it because you wanted to show the board that you had leverage? Tessa slammed her hand on the table. Fine, she shouted. Fine. I used your name. We all used your name. You are the big important Fed. You have the clearance. You have the power. Why shouldn't we benefit from it because it is illegal? Tessa, because it is treason. Oh, stop with the high and mighty act, she spat. We were drowning. Riley. Mom and Dad were going to lose the house. Logan was about to go under. And you were sitting in D.C. with your perfect salary and your secure job, ignoring us. I ignored you because you are parasites. I said calmly. Tessa stared at me. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of rage, not remorse. I knew they were going to look. She confessed, her voice dropping to a whisper. Logan told me. He said he was going to take a peek and see if there was anything he could sell. I thought it would just be some corporate data. I didn't think it would be this. You knew. I repeated. You knew they were planning a theft, and you said nothing. I thought it was harmless, she cried. I thought if they got some money, They would stop asking me for loans. They bleed me dry. Riley. Every month I just wanted them off my back. I looked at my sister, the pediatric surgeon, the savior. She had allowed her brother to commit espionage because she wanted to save her own bank account. You are just as guilty as they are. I said, you just have a better lawyer. I stood up to leave. Riley. Wait, she pleaded. If you testify, if you tell them I knew I will lose my license, I will lose everything. I looked back at her. You should have thought about that before you decided that federal law was just a suggestion for the West family. The next day, the circular firing squad began. Agent Miller called me into the observation room at the field office, behind the one-way glass. Logan was being interviewed. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that washed out his complexion. It wasn't my idea. Logan was shouting at the interrogator. It was my mother. She is the one who unlocked the door. She used the master key. She told me the room was clear. Miller switched the feed. Now, my mother was on the screen. She was not crying anymore. She looked hard, angry. My son is a liar, she said, her voice icy. I never told him to use that device. I just wanted to see the papers. He is the one who brought the criminal element into this. He used me. He used his own mother to get access. Miller switched the feed again. My father. I was just watching TV, he yelled. I did not know what they were doing upstairs, if my wife and son were conspiring. That is on them. I am an innocent bystander. I watched them turn on each other. The tight-knit family that valued blood over water was now tearing each other's throats out to shave a few months off a sentence. They are disgusting. I said to Miller, they are scared. Miller replied, and they are realizing that you are not coming to save them. She turned to me. Riley, there is something else. What the broker? Data miner. 88. We tracked the payment Logan received on Thursday, the $5,000. It came from a shell account in Cyprus. But we traced the IP used to access that account, and it traces back to a server farm in St. Petersburg. Miller said, I froze. The broker wasn't a corporate thief. He wasn't stealing customer lists. This is state-sponsored. Miller said quietly, the people who hired your brother, they serve the SVR, Russian Foreign Intelligence. My legs felt weak. I grabbed the back of a chair. My brother was working for Russia. He didn't know. Miller said, he thought it was corporate. But that doesn't matter. He was building a bridge for a foreign adversary to walk right into our servers. She looked at me intensely. This is why we could not let it go. Riley, this is why you had no choice. If you had hidden this, if you had tried to cover for them, I would be a traitor. I finished. Exactly. You would be a co-conspirator in a foreign intelligence operation. You would be facing life in a supermax. I looked at the screens. I looked at my family, bickering and blaming and lying. They almost killed me, I whispered. Not physically, but they almost ended my life. Miller nodded. And that is why you are going to be the key to the whole thing. How? Because the broker, the Russian handler, he doesn't know we have Logan. He doesn't know the raid was us. He thinks Logan went dark. So, Miller said, a small, dangerous smile forming on her lips. We are going to use Logan's account. We are going to answer the email. And we are going to tell him that the sister is ready to play ball. She handed me a file. We are going to use the West family treachery to catch a Russian spy. And you, Riley, are going to write the script. I looked at the file. I looked at the surveillance photo of the broker. My family had started this war because they were greedy and arrogant. They thought they were the main characters in a drama they could control, but they were just bit players. They were just the opening act. I took the file from Miller. Let's do it, I said. The discovery phase was over. The trial of the West family was a foregone conclusion. They were done. They were history. But the real work, the work of cleaning up the mess they made, that was just beginning, and for the first time in weeks. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like an analyst. I felt like the hunter. The sentencing hearing took place in Federal Courtroom 4, a windowless chamber of mahogany and marble that smelled of floor wax and judgment. It was 3 months after the raid. The media circus had moved on to the next scandal, leaving only the cold, hard machinery of the justice system to grind the West family into dust. I sat in the back row. I was not there as a daughter. I was there as a witness for the prosecution, though my testimony had been rendered largely unnecessary by the mountain of digital evidence my family had created against themselves. My parents sat at the defense table, looking shrunken. My father's suit, once his armor of suburban respectability, hung loosely on his frame. My mother looked older, her face lined with the stress of asset forfeiture and public humiliation. Logan sat separately. He was in an orange jumpsuit. He had been denied bail after the revelation of the Russian connection. He looked like a ghost, his eyes hollow, his arrogance stripped away to reveal the terrified child underneath. The proceedings were brutal in their efficiency. "Your Honor," my father's lawyer began, his voice practiced and smooth. "Grant and Elaine West are not spies. They are not traitors. They are simply parents who were confused by the complex nature of their daughter's work. They made a mistake. They exercised poor judgment in an attempt to bond with their child. They do not deserve prison. They deserve compassion." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. My father nodded vigorously, trying to look like a pillar of the community who had just taken a wrong turn. Then it was Logan's turn. "I did not mean to hurt anyone," Logan told the judge, his voice cracking. "I just wanted to save my business. I didn't know who the buyer was. I thought it was just corporate data. I am not a criminal. I am just an entrepreneur who got in over his head." It was the same song they had been singing since the beginning. "We didn't mean it. We didn't know. It is not our fault." The assistant United States attorney stood up. She was a woman named Perkins, sharp as a scalpel. She walked to the podium and placed a single file on the stand. "Your Honor," she said, her voice cutting through the performative remorse of the defense. "The defense asks for compassion based on ignorance, but the government has proven intent." She pointed at Logan. Defendant Logan West did not just get in over his head. He solicited a cyber weapon. He negotiated a price for his sister's credentials. He utilized a keystroke injection tool designed to compromise a federal mainframe. She pointed at my parents, and defendants Grant and Elaine West did not just want to bond. They utilized a master key to bypass a locked door. They staged a diversion. They acted as lookouts for an act of espionage. Ignorance of the buyer's nationality does not excuse the sale of the goods. The judge looked at them. His expression was unreadable. But the real blow came next. Perkins turned to the gallery and nodded at Agent Miller, who was sitting near the front. "Your Honor," Perkins continued, "to understand the severity of this breach, the court must understand the nature of the stolen material. The defense claims these were basic work files." She paused for effect. They were not. The documents in question were a canary packet. They were a fabricated intelligence set designed specifically to track leaks. The room went silent. I saw Logan's head snap up. He stared at the prosecutor. Then he turned slowly to look at me in the back of the room. The shock on his face was absolute, the entire time. Perkins said, "The defendants were not stealing state secrets. They were stealing a tracking beacon. And by scanning those documents, by plugging in that drive, they did not just expose themselves. They led us to the network," while Perkins was speaking. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a single vibration. I checked it discreetly. It was a text from Director Vance. "Target acquired. The script worked. Broker in custody." I allowed myself a small, invisible exhale, while my family was begging for mercy in a Maryland courtroom. A tactical team in a warehouse district in Europe was taking down the man who had hired Logan. We had used Logan's seized laptop. I had impersonated him for weeks, feeding the broker just enough proof to keep him on the line, drawing him out until he made a mistake. My family had tried to destroy my career. Instead, they had given me the biggest win of my life. The judge cleared his throat. "I have heard enough," he said. He looked at my parents, Grant and Elaine West. "You betrayed the trust of your daughter. And in doing so, you betrayed your country. You prioritized your financial comfort over national security. He sentenced them to 36 months of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a fine that wiped out whatever equity they had left in the house. They would not go to prison, but they were ruined. They would lose the house in Arbor Ridge. They would live the rest of their lives in a small apartment, marked as felons. Then the judge turned to Logan. Logan West, you brought a weapon of cyber warfare into a private residence. You attempted to sell access to the United States government for $50,000. The fact that you failed is irrelevant. The intent was treasonous. 8 years, federal prison, no possibility of parole for 85% of the sentence. Logan let out a sob. It was a raw, ugly sound. The marshals moved in immediately, pulling him to his feet. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. As the courtroom cleared, I stood up. I had to sign some final paperwork with the prosecution team. I walked toward the front. My parents were standing there, huddled with their lawyer, waiting to be processed for their probation. They looked up and saw me. The look in their eyes was not sadness, it was hatred. Pure, distilled hatred. You knew, my father hissed. You knew the whole time. Those papers were a trap. You set us up. I stopped. I looked at him, then at my mother. I did not set you up. I said, I brought work home. I told you not to touch it. I locked the door. That is a lie. My mother cried, her voice shrill. You knew we would look. You knew we needed money. You left it there to tempt us. You are a monster, Riley. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. I looked at the man who had raised me, and I felt nothing. The cord was not just cut, it was burned. I locked the door. I repeated, the only people who open a locked door are thieves. You made your choice when you turned that handle. My mother stepped forward. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. Tell me one thing, she demanded. Just tell me one thing. I looked at her hand on my sleeve. I did not pull away. What I asked. She looked into my eyes, searching for some remnant of the daughter she thought she could control. Why, she asked. Why did you let it go this far? You could have stopped it. You could have warned us. So tell me, what did you choose? Did you choose your career over your own blood? Did you choose a job over your family? The question hung in the air. The lawyers stopped packing their briefcases. The marshals paused. It was the question they had been asking me my whole life, in 1,000 different ways. Why can't you be normal? Why is your job so important? Why won't you help us? I looked at Logan, being led away in cuffs. I looked at my parents, bankrupt and broken. I thought about the shipping containers I tracked. I thought about the names on the lists I protected. I thought about the families who slept safely in their beds because people like me stood on the wall and watched the darkness. I gently removed my mother's hand from my arm. I looked her dead in the eye. I chose the job, I said, my voice steady and quiet, so that other people can still have families. I turned around and walked away. I did not look back. I heard my mother crying, but it sounded like noise from a television in another room. It had nothing to do with me anymore. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, blinding sunlight. That night, I returned to my apartment in DRC. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that rings in your ears. I took my laptop out of my bag. I placed it on my desk. I opened the biometric safe and placed the hard drive inside. I heard the heavy thunk of the steel bolt sliding home. It was a lonely sound. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. I saw the lights of the monuments, the flow of traffic, the life of the capital. My phone sat on the counter. It was silent. No texts from Mom, no jokes from Dad, no demands from Logan, no guilt trips from Tessa. I was an orphan now. I had made myself one. But as I looked at the reflection of my own face in the glass, I didn't see a monster. I saw a guardian. I had paid the price. It was a steep price. It cost me everything I came from. But the wall held. The data was safe. The bad guys were in chains. And if I had to do it all over again, if I had to choose between the deadbolt and the family who refused to respect it, I would lock the door every single time. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a long journey, and I appreciate you sticking with me until the end. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening in the car, at work, or maybe relaxing at home? Drop a comment below and let me know your location so we can see how far this story has traveled. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Kate Revenge Stories, hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this video reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.